everybody. Hello, it's Matthew Street, and welcome to the Matthew Street channel, folks. And I cover power pop. I cover the Beatles, as you all know, and rock and roll. But first, before I start this great interview I'm about to conduct, I want to thank Maureen Piatoso from Jem Records, the publicist there, for her assistance in helping setting up this interview. So thank you, Maureen. And this is a first for my channel, folks. Let me tell you, I will be conducting an interview with somebody who I consider to be a music industry legend. Someone like me who's been buying records since the early 70s, coming right up through today. This person played a major role in my record buying days, which I'm still involved in. And as a Beatle fan, let me say, if you've ever bought an import in the 70s and 80s, like maybe you bought a collection of Beatles oldies like I did from this gentleman and his label. Maybe you bought the Beatles Beat. Maybe you bought the Beatles Greatest. Maybe you bought the UK albums like Beatles for Sale, different covers, different song lineups. Or, and my one record that still has the label on it, the Beatles Help album, still has the Jem Records sticker and logo on it from when I bought it all those years ago. But folks, let me tell you something. Not just the Beatles, thousands and thousands, numerous, hundreds of different groups, singers, and artists. This gentleman helped to import their music domestically into the United States so fans like you and I could buy it. I'm talking the Stones, the Kinks, the Beach Boys, and countless more. We'd be here all night if we talked about all the artists that this gentleman and his label was involved with. So I want to say right now, this label is celebrating its 50th anniversary in 2022. And one of the highlights is a milestone. They're going to be releasing a brand new compilation, the third in an ongoing series. Will be out there. If by the time you're watching this, it's going to be out there on CD, vinyl, download, streaming right now. Marty Scott, founder and president of Jem Records, a warm welcome to the Matthew Street channel, and kudos on the release of your third compilation. Jem Records celebrates Pete Townshend. Welcome to the Matthew Street channel.
Hi, how are you doing? Good seeing you again.
Great. Great, and great having you here, and I'm so excited about this release, and I can't wait to talk about it. But before we talk about the brand new Jem Records Celebrates edition, Pete Townshend, let me say this. We have to first talk about Jem Records and the 50th anniversary. This is something very important to me. I have to tell you, I was one of the many teenagers back in the day. You're talking back in the 70s, coming into the 80s when I was in my 20s. I was so happy to buy the imports, the records you were bringing into this country, records I was so happy to have. Jem Records was my go-to label to get all these rare and hard to find recordings that I craved so much back in those days. So I thank you for that. But I have to tell you, for many, many decades, I had no idea how I was getting these records, where they came from. How did Jem Records even come into existence? And I know Jem Records had very humble beginnings. So can you take a moment to talk about the origins of the label, Jem Records, and how it got going?
Well, sure. Well, first of all, there was never a Jem Records label till 2013. Jem Records was a group of companies, okay? Jem Records Distribution, Passport, PVC, EG, all the different labels distributed, Jem Records West, Jem Records Texas, Pacific Records in England, but there was never a label of Jem till 2013. Jem started originally in 1970, August, when my two partners and I, Jeff Tenenbaum, Ed Grassi, myself, J-E-N-M, went to England after we graduated college. Before that, we were selling records. Before that, we were selling records in the dorm. And we were selling American records, and we were selling them for less money than the local stores were charging. And when we graduated college, we decided that we weren't going to go to, grad school or law school, whatever. Ed decided to go to law school, but Jeff and I, when we were going to be going into business, and Ed would follow. So we went to Europe, England and Europe and Israel for a 6-week trip. And when we got to England, our first stop, there was a record I wanted to get, and it was called Direct Hits by The Who. And you couldn't get it in America. So I went to a record store and I found it, and I thought, wait a minute, if I want this record, there must be a lot of other people who want this record. So I said, let's find out how we can bring this record to America. So we found someone who would export records to us. And unlike later in the decade when we had our own shipping containers that were coming in every single day, it took 6 weeks to get the first order. Mm-hmm. And in that order was the direct hits and a few other records like John Entwistle's first solo record that wasn't out in the States, and a couple of different backtrack things of Hendrix and the Who and whatever, and Elton John, Empty Sky. And they were the first records that we imported. And soon stores started to call us. Now, we were in a trailer in the parking lot of Program One Stop in Union, New Jersey. And we were selling records mostly to kids on college campuses, but stores started to call us and say, hey, can you get us this record or that record? And to be honest with you, we didn't really know much about all these different records. There was always people like yourself, who were at stores and they wanted these different records. So it started to build and build and build. And eventually we moved into 1,000 square foot part of that building at the One Stop. And a year later, we moved into our own warehouse in South Plainfield, New Jersey. And 4 years later, we moved to a bigger warehouse. And then later on, we got bigger and bigger. But that's the so-called humble beginnings when we were in a trailer, on a parking lot.
Am I correct that at one point, Jem had close to 30 people on staff? Did you have?
Oh, no. If you count Jem Records, no, we must have had maybe like 60 people in New Jersey, maybe 30 in California. I don't know, maybe 15, 20 in Texas, maybe 15 in England. Then later on, in the 80s, we had a separate Passport Records office, both in New Jersey and in California. And there may be another 10, 15 people there. So there, well over 100 people, work for Jem,
Yeah, I was going to say that much bigger than I always imagined it to be. And I never was aware that you had more than the Reseda, California office and then the South Plainfield, New Jersey office. I didn't realize that you were as far as Texas and overseas as well. It's amazing.
Yeah, we had the overseas office before we had California.
Okay.
Because we started to import from our own company in England, and they collected the records from the different companies. And the companies would actually be pushing things on us, which is sort of interesting because they wanted us to break these records in America because they couldn't get it signed in America, or their American counterpart couldn't care less, or whatever the story would be. So we had it was first in near Shepherd's Bush, where the Who came from,
right.
Near there, but not exactly in Shepherd's Bush. And then eventually we moved north of Camden Town, Northwest England. We had our own flat that we owned, where everybody from Jem, when they come over to England, stayed there. And eventually we had people from America who lived in England. But Jem Records Texas didn't start till I think 1984. Jem Records West, I believe, started maybe 76, I think. But Pacific Records, our English company, started way back, I think in 74, maybe 75.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about a couple of different records, but first, being my channel is kind of a Beatles-centric channel for the most part, maybe 60% Beatles. Did you find the Beatles imports you were bringing in, some of the few that I showed here right just now, were they a real popular draw? Were they a big grab, the Beatles?
Oh, sure. I mean, and the irony is that EMI in England and Bovema in Holland and other European EMI affiliates, they love what we were doing, and so did Capitol Records. I mean, there's a great story that the vice president, we were starting to break records, and we broke 2 EMI UK Harvest records, a group called ELO off of Electric Light Orchestra off of 10853 Overture, and a group called Flash, which was on Sovereign Records, which is a label imprint of EMI. We were breaking these records at FM, and this was in January of 1972.
Oh wow!
I mean, we were still in the trailer, okay, and it was starting to get to be bigger and bigger. And then eventually, later on that year, the vice president of marketing of Capitol, Herb Belkin, the vice president of A&R, Rupert Perry, who eventually became, head of the Beatles, committee. They flew out to New Jersey, and they wanted to buy Jem.
Oh wow!
We didn't want to sell, but they knew there was something going on, because how could these guys in New Jersey, who at that point, I guess it was in '73 when they came out, we were in South Plainfield, and we had our little warehouse. It was like 3,000 square feet altogether. We had our warehouse, we had our sales staff, but it was very small. There weren't that many people working with Jem, and we were breaking records as imports all over FM radio, and they couldn't figure it out how we could get a record in the top 10 in record world in airplay, and have all these retail stores report us as top 25 sales when we weren't selling anywhere near what these domestic records were, but they were so into us, and the stores were into what we were doing, and the FM radio stations were, that they were promoting what we were selling.
Right. And I mean, yeah, because you have such amazing stuff you were bringing over. Didn't you bring The Cure, an album by The Cure at one point?
No, we didn't bring in The Cure.
Okay.
You're confusing the imports to our domestic manufacturer.
Oh, okay.
Passport, group of labels, which was Passport Records, Passport Jazz,
All right.
Audion, PVC. The Cure, Boys Don't Cry, was the first Cure album. It was not released in England. In England, they only had singles and EP.
Okay.
In America, we put together Boys Don't Cry as an album, and that broke that band, and then they were picked up by Elektra. And then eventually by Siren other labels. But their first record was on PVC.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. And also, out of all the Beatles things you were bringing in, any that you stand out to you that were the most popular with fans that were really craving to get Beatles?
Everybody liked the UK pressings. Okay. Yeah. And we had a promotion one year, get into the high quality of imports. And we had Jem rolling papers, and with the Jem, I think it was a 1977 calendar. We had accompanying rolling papers to get into the high quality of imports. And we had a poster, don't be xenophobic, get into imports. And we were pushing the idea that the import quality of the records was better. I mean, you compared an EMI UK pressing to, let's say, a domestic RCA pressing. I mean, an RCA pressing, you can bend it in half almost, compared to, the much better quality. Even the covers in the UK were actually not as thick as the American covers.
Right.
Because in England they took the records out of the sleeves and they played them on the turntables and stuff, and you bought them, they put them back in. But people were very much into the quality of the pressings because they were a better quality.
Yeah, the American people over here, Dave Dexter and the people at Capitol, they butchered some of those early Beatles albums with reverb and drenching it with effects and
they
stuff.
Put 10 tracks on a record. In the UK, that 14. So every 3 albums. In England, there were 4 albums. In America, plus compilations and things like that. You got to remember, in England, they didn't put singles on the albums.
Right.
So I mean, things like Penny Lane, was never on it. Sorry Fields was never on an album. I mean, and so on and so forth. But yeah, as far as the compilations did very well. Like you mentioned that the one you had with the 16, that was not out in America.
Yeah, this one here, this is a great album.
And we bought directly from EMI's factory in Hayes, in the Middlesex in England. They shipped directly to our English company, who shipped it over to us. We bought directly from Bovema. We bought directly from Electrola in Germany. As far as the EMI stuff, all the other manufacturers, the same thing. Phonogram Direct, Version Direct, Island Direct. Everybody said Decca, Direct. Decca was kind of strange because they were like the most conservative country, imaginable. I mean, they had, when you go into Decca's headquarters, there were 2 elevators, one for everybody and another one just for the chairman. No one else can go on that elevator, or the managing director. Right. I actually went in that elevator because I had a meeting with Ken, I can't remember his last name, who was the managing director of Decca, and I had befriended him because of his relationship with Seymour and Linda Stein, who were my partners. Seymour was my partner at Siren with Passport. And I went to see Ken East, that was his name. I went to see him because I wanted to license the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus, which was not out in America. Right. And I offered, he's got me in touch with the Stones manager, Sir Rupert Lowenstein, when I called him up in Holland, and I offered him $1 million for the rights for America, and he turned me down, and it didn't come out in America for what, 10 more
Decades.
years.
It was a long time before it came out.
But I mean, I had a great relationship with the heads of all the English. David Betteridge, the managing director of Island, was incredible to us. The MDs of CBS, the people who ran, well, of course, Branson and I was Branson's first friend in America. I went to his first wedding in England, and Nick Powell, his late partner, Virgin, I drove him around New York looking for sites for their first store. And, we actually had a label together, Virgin America, and we licensed stuff from Virgin. Charisma, we're ridiculously close with Charisma. I mean, we helped get Genesis going in America, and we put out a lot of records that we licensed from Charisma. We had Brand X, which was Passport, the offshoot of the Genesis, and many other things. But Charisma, we worked with every day. Talking on the phone, and of course there was no email back then. It was a telex machine.
Right.
You know what a telex machine is? It was this big, bulky thing. It was almost, I guess the size of a washing machine, and you had to type your message, and it went onto this little piece of tape.
A teletype, yeah.
And then you had to put that piece of tape into the machine and play it back. And when it played back, so to speak, the machine shook as it sent the message over overseas, and they got it back on the same thing on a telex machine. That's how it was. It wasn't until 1980, I don't know, 82, when there was when they even had things like fax machines.
Back then,
the 80s, when they had fax machines, they used paper that would actually fade over time. And so if you had a contract that came over by fax, you had to figure out
you better,
otherwise it would disappear.
Do something with the right away, or it's all.
And you didn't
done.
have the rights anymore after that. So that gives you a sort of idea, because Jem was a group of companies that grew, in
amazing
different directions, both in distribution, manufacturing of labels, and distribution of hundreds of American labels.
Right.
Besides all the imports.
Yeah. So let me ask you something else. Do you think the guys in Cheap Trick owe you a beer or two for what you did for them?
Well, I don't know if they owe me a beer, but I do think that it was pretty lucky that I came up with that idea, because they weren't really doing that well in terms of breaking through.
Well, how did that come? You just on your own decided to focus on that?
No, what happened is that, I had Pez Band from Illinois, and they were friends with Cheap Trick. And I also signed the shoes, from Zion, Illinois. And I had become very well known, I guess, in that genre. And, I like Cheap Trick. I think, Pez Band opened for Cheap Trick and shows and stuff. And they were, they're friends. And somehow I found out that Cheap Trick had recorded a record in Japan, Live at Budokan.
Right.
And Epic was not going to put it out because they had this new album called, Dream Police.
Right.
That was going to come out. So I called up, I guess the president of Epic, I think it was, who was Ron Luxembourg, I guess, and Ron had me talk to Jim Tyrell, who was the vice president of marketing. And Jim was the only African-American head of rock marketing I ever met. Okay. And we sat down in the office in New York, and I said, look, I want the rights to bring this thing in directly from Sony. He said, sure, why, we're not putting it out. So they hooked me up through CBS International and Sony, which was a CBS affiliate in Japan. And we ordered, I think we ordered 10,000 copies to start. And the boxes came in to our warehouse, in South Plainfield, and they said Sony/Jem. I mean, this was not a third party, imported. This was direct from the factory. And then, so, the Jem machine, as small as it was, as I said before, had a significant amount of power because the people at FM stations loved what we were doing. The salespeople and managers at the record stores loved what we were doing. So everybody worked, if they liked the record, together. So we sent out the copies, we didn't get promo copies. So we just took, 100 copies of it and sent it out to all the FM stations, and the stores ordered it, and it exploded. Every FM station that got it played it. I Want You to Want Me and other tracks became
Oh
very,
my God, yeah.
very
Top
quickly.
10. Top
Yeah,
10.
and we every like 3 days later we had to order another 10,000. So it's legendary as to how many it actually sold. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen numbers that are astronomical. It wasn't astronomical. What happened is that Epic realized we better put this out, because
And eventually I think it went triple platinum or
right,
something.
it sold 3 million copies.
Yeah.
And Epic, was very happy with what we did because, back then, we had an insanely good relationship with the American companies. Sometimes we put out a record before it came out in America that, they might have wished we hadn't, but we didn't sell that many copies of it. I'll give you a perfect example. Yes, Tales of Topographic Oceans. Okay, now I do this thing on Facebook. It's called, Jem 50 Stories. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the stories I'm going to write about is we started a radio show. It's called Hands Across the Water. Okay. And they had a great little logo of, like this, two hands, with the flag. And anyway, so we had a great relationship with the DJs in England. So somehow, and I had nothing to do with that from that end, somehow we got the tapes to an entire side of Yes, Tales of Topographic Oceans before they gave it to Atlantic.
Oh, wow.
And so we put it on the show, and like all over FM stations, they went crazy. They loved it. And Atlantic didn't mind because we were promoting. It was only on a radio show. You couldn't buy it, So we had this show, and it was a failure because we really didn't get enough advertising for it to make it work. But, it was a great idea that we had for, an import show nationwide. We sent that on flexi disc. If any of you, collectors can find a flexi disc of Hands Across the Water, it's probably worth something. But that was an example of when we got a tape that the American company hadn't even heard yet.
Right, right.
But there was so many. Here's
Amazing.
a good example: the Jam. Now, when Polydor England signed the Jam, they wanted them to break in America in a big way. So they sent advanced copies of the album signed by, the band, sent them over to me to get everybody at Jem excited because they wanted us to break the Jam. Okay. And there were that's a perfect example of the UK company wanting us to promote it on their behalf. So it'd be licensed to someone in America. And
right.
So there are a lot of examples like that. Everybody, did it for their own purposes. And
it's just amazing listening to you and the impact you had in so many realms and in so many genres of music. And hey, you look at someone like Cheap Trick and look at them now. They're in the mainstream. They're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So, a tip of the hat to
what with Rod Stewart. What the hell's that?
Yeah, that's true.
They're playing in Milwaukee tonight, I heard.
Yeah, that's true. I got to say one thing, coming a little bit around again to talk about this brand new fabulous compilation called Jem Records Celebrates Pete Townshend, available everywhere, folks. Fabulous, excellent. You have an interesting relationship with Pete Townshend, from what I understand. And can you just share a little bit of that about what went down with Pete?
Jem Records Celebrates Pete Townshend, which comes out on August 5th on vinyl, CD, download, and streaming, is the third album in a series that I put out once a year.
And all fantastic.
I put out in October of 1980 on his 80th birthday. I put on Jem Records Celebrates John Lennon. Last July, we put out Jem Records Celebrates Brian Wilson. We know Brian loved it himself. And in August, we're putting out Jem Records Celebrates Pete Townshend. Now, I've been a Who fan since 1975. And if you see the record, you see I wrote the liner notes. It's the first.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's the first record I ever wrote liner notes for. And the reason why I wrote them is I wanted to tell the story of why. And I was a Who fan since 1975. I was a teenager in New Jersey, and I would listen to WLS in Chicago on Sunday nights because they had this British import show, and I heard My Generation, and that was it. So I was always into the Who. I went to see the Who in 1967 at the Murray Decay show in New York when they and Cream were the 13th and 15th acts on the bill, and then in May of 1969. I went to see the Who perform Tommy at the Fillmore East before I heard the record, and that changed my life. I mean, that was probably the most important part of my life. And that was the night after Townshend kicked the firemen off the stage when the A&P was next
Yeah.
door. So 1969, I hear Tommy, and that just blows me away. And so, of course, then we go to England, and I buy direct hits, and that was the reason why we started the import. I mean, if it wasn't for direct hits, there'd be no imports, okay?
Wow.
Leave it at that. Matter of fact, if you look at the back cover of the album, I have a picture
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah, there it is, right
The
there.
actual I have the original album still. It's framed, that I bought in the August of 1971. Actually, even though look at the back cover, there's Jem rolling papers. Look at that. I forgot about that. Flip it over. See that? Yeah.
Right there, right? There it is.
Jem rolling paper. You get into
Next to the catalog, right next to the catalog.
Right, exactly. So basically, in 1978, somehow Pete Townshend had heard about Jem, and I contacted him, and he said, well, why don't you come over and we'll meet? Because I had an idea to put out all his demos in box sets, including Lifehouse.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
That would have
So
been
September, I fly over to England, September 7th,
78. Yeah.
78, and I go over to his place, the boathouse, I guess it was at Yopai, and I'm there from like 1 o'clock to 5 o'clock. And what's important is that I spent 4 hours with him, and I didn't expect this. I mean, it's a meeting. You expect it's over an hour, and he's giving me, we're talking about doing these box sets, and he's playing me things, and I say, oh my God, this is it. This is gonna be the biggest deal I've ever done for anything, because we're going to put out a series of albums by, my hero, Pete Townshend. And then he's showing me the Mayor Baba album. So I said, okay, I'll buy every one. So we bought every Mayor Baba album that there was of all of them. And he said, okay, tomorrow we're going to meet at Twickenham Studios with Bill Curbishley, who's manager, and we're going to work out this deal. So I'm literally flying back to our flat,
yeah.
in the Holly Mews in Southwest 10. And then I get a call from Gail Colson, who's at Charisma, Peter Gabriel's manager at the time. And she's going to be taking me to Nebworth the next day, the big, thing. And she says, Marty, Keith Moon died. And I said, what?
Oh, gee.
Keith Moon, I said, Gail, I've been with Pete Townshend all afternoon. We don't know anything about this. And it just blew me away. And then a little bit later, Mike Shaw, who one time was the Who's tour manager, but then he had a terrible car accident. He was in a wheelchair and worked in the office. He called me and told me, the bad news, and of course the meeting was canceled for the next day. It never happened.
Oh.
So the deal never happened. I remember seeing Pete in after concert. Actually, it was a Genesis concert at Madison Square Garden. After the concert, there was a get together upstairs in a room, and I saw him, and we were talking about the thing, and and by that time he was doing things like Scoop, his own. The Atlantic put out the demos,
right,
different sets, and so I mean, and Lifehouse actually did come out, I believe, in 1998 or 1999, there was a 6 CD set of Life, which I did import for my copy for myself and bought, which I no longer have, but it was everything that, I wanted to do with that. So,
it's just,
it was a great idea.
Yeah, no, it was. It's just,
but of course, to continue the bad luck with the Who, my wife, Tony, who I met when originally she was assistant to the art director of Famous Music when Sire and Passport were distributed, and then she became the art director of Sire when Sire and Passport, were together. And eventually, I married him in 1980. She had owned art galleries, and we had this one gallery in Riverside Square in Hackensack, New Jersey. It was called the Art of Music. We had one in Millburn, New Jersey, and moved it up to there. And I had arranged to have John Entwistle come with all his artwork, for example, the Who by Numbers. And
yeah, right, exactly.
So he was going to come when the Who was going to be on their tour in 2002. It was arranged. Yeah, right. It was arranged.
I know where this is.
For the show at the PNC Arts Center. He was coming to the gallery, and there were hundreds of people who had made RSVPs. The entire gallery was all his original artwork, plus all his lithos and this and that. And you know what happened.
Right, exactly.
and
Yeah.
he dies. So I'm not allowed to go near Daltrey.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. You're done. Go. They don't
No,
want
I
to see
did,
you.
but there was a story. I actually did. We were doing the Intergalactic Touring Band in 1977. We were recording at the Who studio. I think we were doing a vocal with Rod Argent, a track called Silver Lady. And I remember Roger was throwing darts at the door, behind the door, and you have to open the door again to the actual door. And at the time, like, I was a little bit naive. I didn't want to go over to him, I just said, "Excuse me," and I walked through, and I'm thinking, what a schmuck. I could have talked to Roger Daltrey for a couple of hours just talking about stuff, and I just went to the studio because I was,
Right.
record.
Amazing. Well, it's funny because now your Who connection has come full circle with the release of this great album. Jem Records celebrates Pete Townshend. It's like, here we are back to your beginning again, 1965. You, as a young teenager, you getting into.
Well, that's what I talk about in the liner notes. But the record is, all the artists in Jem contribute tracks. I mean, there's 14 tracks on the record, and everybody from the Weaklings and the Griplies, Anderson Council, Lisa Michaels and Super 8, and Richard Barone and Jonathan Pushkar, and the Midnight Callers, who do a great version. I'm sure you heard it 100 times.
Yeah.
All on the record, and I think it's a great record, and the dance orders are.
I think it's fabulous. It's just, you've got such great artists under the Jem banner, and you've produced this album, and Kurt Ryle from the Gripweeds has assisted you, I guess, with the mastering and mixing.
Kurt, of course, the Gripweeds are on it, and he also produced the Edison Council and the Midnight Callers track. And then he mixed a couple of tracks with me. Bob O'Reilly, he and I mixed, spent 11 hours to mix that track. We'll
so
talk
Lisa Michaels and Super 8, that's a great track. Yeah.
It's a pretty complicated track. Lisa did 44 background vocals on that track.
Oh my goodness. Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, there's no synthesizers on it. All the synthesizer for Bob O'Reilly is really Trip Ryan on a mandolin.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, there's no synth.
I thought it was some type of synth, but that's amazing that he did that all with mandolin. Amazing. I got to talk about real quickly. I want to get into a couple more of the songs, but the cover art and the design of all your creations have been fantastic. But I want to focus on this one because this one really stands out with that. The Who target. There's Pete with his Rickenbacker, and you've got some great people. I think. Could you talk a little about Anthony Parisi, Tony and Blake Scott, and their contributions to this, because it looks wonderful.
Yeah, the Anthony Parisi does the packaging for the Jem Celebrate series. Okay,
right.
And he did the Lennon, he did the Brian Wilson, and I wanted to do something for the Townshend that would be, show Pete in action. So of course, the Lennon one is a Hirschfeld. I licensed the rights to that picture.
Right. Al Hirschfeld. Yeah.
And Neil Glazer, who sold all Al's rock, artwork, who sold to Tony's galleries, put me in touch with. He actually gave the rights to do that. But on the Townshend one, we want to do something different. So Anthony Parisi, who in Weakling's term is known as Sketchy Weakling, because he does some artwork, he put together the picture of Pete. And my wife Tony, having been an art director, listen, Tony's most famous cover, she did the first Ramones cover. So that absolutely pantheon of rock, of art director genius.
Anyway, her work's amazing.
She came up with the idea of the bullseye and putting Pete, in front of the bullseye. And there's a special logo that we're using, is the Jem 50 logo. You can see it on the vinyl right below the sticker. And if you look at there's a Jem 50 logo.
Actually, I have it right here. I can show to everybody on the shirt.
Oh, there's a shirt. That's right. Oh, we have to talk about the shirt. So my son Blake, who's a graphic designer, came up with the Jem 50 logo, which is used on the T-shirt, which is being sent out to certain special people. And if you want a Jem shirt, I imagine there's a way of getting one. It turns out that a lot of rock writers are 2XL in shirt size. A lot of rock writers our 2XL.
Too much sitting in front of the computer, I guess.
Exactly. So, Blake did the Gem 50 logo, Tony did the background, and Anthony did the packaging. If you notice, it's a 6-panel package, on the CD. If you open it, this time around, we put pictures of all the artists in there.
Oh yeah, I love that touch. How you
and if you notice, if you look at the middle panel, you'll notice there's little Passport Records box.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the Passport record box is a great story about that. When Brand X had their first album, Unorthodox Behavior, Passport was distributed by Arista, which in and of itself is a Gem 50 story, if you think about it. But I wanted to promote Brand X to the FM stations and writers, because Phil Collins was in the band, but he was in the band as the drummer. He wasn't singing the lead. So I found these cigarettes that had a big X on them. So I had Arista make these special boxes. It's laser cut Passport logo.
Oh wow!
On the top. But you see, what some of the people at Arista knew and other people at Arista didn't know, when you opened up the box, on the inside cover of that box was a mirror. Okay.
Okay.
And you took out the cigarettes, and you were more interested in the mirror than you were with the cigarettes. Okay? And so I remember the head of finance, the controller of Arista, said, "Why is there a mirror on the inside of this thing?" And I said, "Oh, well, it's just in case people have to fix their hair,
powder their nose or whatever." Yeah,
literally. That's one of the. There's also a Gem letter opener in the back cover. And
I noticed that.
And there's also the actual Gem satin jacket on the back cover. If you look at the back cover,
I love that. Gee, I wish those things were still around. That's
cool. I actually have mine. I can't actually fit into it, anymore. But that actually, I got a picture of that from my first secretary. Who actually donated a picture of that jacket, which he used. But back then there was all these promotional items and things like that, and people have been collecting.
And it's so cool that you brought all those artifacts together on to this release, and especially with that first album, Direct Hits. I mean, it's just such a good complete package. It's so well done. It's so well.
You want to talk about
the eye.
Songs? There's some songs you want to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know where to start, because there's 14 tracks on here. 4 of the artists have 2 tracks apiece, and then the rest do 1 track, but they're also amazing. What I like most about your compilations is that these artists, yes, they're under the power pop rock and roll label, but they're also unique, and they bring their personal touch to these songs, whether it be the Lennon one, the Brian Wilson, or especially now on the Pete Townshend one. Like, for example, we were talking earlier about Lisa Michaels in Super 8, and how she, to Baba O'Riley and to I Can't Explain especially, really blew me away, that I was not expecting what came out of the speakers when I heard I Can't Explain. And it has grown on me so much. I mean, did you give the artist free license to kind of add their own flair or their own flavor to each of these tracks?
In all honesty, Baba O'Riley, I had some input in terms of how I wanted it to go, especially with Lisa's background. But Trip Ryan, the Super 8, he sent the track I Can't Explain to me. It was basically done, and it just blew me away. And it reminded me of that sitting in like Cafe Wa something in in the village, in the late 50s, some beatnik type thing, because it's like he plays an upright bass on it.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's got that whole the little Greenwich Village vibe. And as a matter of fact, the video is being done today on the 7th of July. Tomorrow, the 8th, I Can't Explain comes out as the first track.
Oh, awesome!
There's a video that'll be available, tomorrow, which you'll be on, YouTube.
By the time the people see this, though, it'll be readily available.
YouTube and see this cool video. I mean, Lisa Michaels and Super 8 do this real bebop, version, and it's sort of a very dark, cozy club type of video. And that one they did themselves. Baba O'Riley was like a collaboration where this is what I want you to do.
I noticed you produced that track.
He blew me away with the using mandolins instead of synthesizers. I mean, that I never would have thought of doing that. But her background vocals, which you'll hear when you listen to it, pretty amazing what she does on it.
And then you've got bands on here that I've been fans of for a long time, bands like the Anderson Council and the Gripweeds. I mean, I go back years loving those bands, even I think even before they were with Jem Records, and they've got some really great tracks on here. I don't know if I should think they were crazy or give them an applause for even attempting to do a quick one. The Gripweeds. I don't know where they got the bravery to do that song.
Here's why.
But they did it so well.
The Gripweeds own the House of Vibes. So the Gripweeds are really the only band that has unlimited amount of time in the studio to do a track. Look what they did on the Lennon, okay, into Strawberry Fields. Look what they did on the Brian Wilson, okay. I mean,
You're So Good to Me, and they had another great track.
You're So Good to Me, I think, is one of Kurt's greatest vocals, period. But they did the other track they did. Okay, look at the other track they did on the Brian Wilson. That, you know, they did Heroes and Villains.
Yes,
but they combined it with stuff from the Smile record and made it like this big opus.
Rolled Plymouth Rock, yeah.
Right. So on this record, you know, they decided to do a quick one. And it's basically like a 9-minute track, but it's really like different songs that are all put together. And each of the three vocalists do different parts of a quick one.
I love that aspect of it. Yeah.
And Kurt told me that, you know, it almost killed them finishing up that track because it was so complicated to do. But if you listen to it, the different sounds for, you know, it's a minute and 30 seconds for this thing and 55 seconds for this part and a crossfade. It's really amazing.
Yeah, it's unbelievable how he put that all together with the band, and I love hearing all the different lead vocalists on it. It's a fabulous track. You would think, how can anyone make a quick one their own after what the Who did with it? But the Gripweeds found a way to make it.
And also the Anderson Council you mentioned are going to have the coolest song in the world on August 8th on the Little Steven's Underground Garage.
That's going to be Glow Girl, right?
Correct.
Yeah, that's a great track. Great track on this album.
Their new guitar player, Michael Potenza. This will be the first album that he's going to be playing on. His guitar playing is great.
Yeah. So many great, I mean, with the Weaklings around here, we've got Jonathan Pushkar's got a track, Richard Barone, the great Richard Barone, pop legend, the Gold Needles from the UK. We've got the Midnight Callers, the Airport 77s. I want to ask you about the Midnight Callers track. That's kind of the only like big solo Pete Townshend hit song that's on here. How did they come to select that song of all songs? Let My Love Open the Door.
That was their choice.
Okay.
That was totally their choice. But originally they were going to do it more acoustically, and that wasn't going to make it. But they did not want to do it, synthesizer, based like the solo one, and they came up, with a great way of doing it. I mean, it's totally different.
Yeah, Pete's version is very 80s, the sounds that Pete does with it is a very pop 80s version. And the Midnight Callers really kind of rock theirs up and make it a real power pop raver, and I loved it. And of course, Nick Puente, he's had a cooler song on your label recently. He does The Seeker, which rocks.
Wait, you got to listen to the second verse of that. I had Nick change the lyrics in the second verse.
Okay.
When it says, I asked the Beatles,
yes, there's a line about the Beatles in the original, and I didn't hear it in this one. Yeah.
No, it doesn't. It says, I tried to do a little promotion for the label, the Underground Garage. It actually says, I asked Little Steven, I asked Palmyra, I asked, it talks about the DJs on the.
Oh, okay. I'm going to have to,
yeah. But I want to talk about the newest artist on Jem, the Airport 77.
Yes, I mentioned Substafool, how they took a mashup of the two songs. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, basically, when I give everybody a chance to do whatever they want to do, so long as there's no conflict between two artists saying we both want to do this. And they said, we're going to do a mashup of Won't Get Fooled Again and Substitute. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking, okay, Substitute, I can see you're a three-piece guitar, bass, and drums. Won't Get Fooled Again, I don't know. I mean, that's like, the synthesizer, classic, right? That and Bob O'Reilly. Well, if Tripp, can do Bob O'Reilly with mandolins, Andy Sullivan of the Airport 77 does it with guitars through a synthesized, piece,
Mhm.
and the actual some of the lines are played on the bass, the lead lines of Won't Get Fooled Again, the solo, in the middle.
Right.
And they did a great mashup, and if you notice, just like on Who's Next, coincidentally, it's totally coincidental. Bob O'Reilly starts it, and Won't Get Fooled Again ends it.
Yeah.
Which was not planned. It's more timing because on vinyl you got to make sure the sides are sort of relatively the same, so you
Right.
lose bottom end and stuff. And so we had to put certain songs in certain places to make sure, and it just worked out that way.
Right. No, it's fabulous. And I like how at the end of it, they kind of give a little nod of the hat to you and Jem Records. There's like a little 15-second.
Well, that's actually
them?
the Edison Council.
Is that the Anderson? Oh,
yeah, that's the Anderson Council.
it doesn't indicate it on the
right,
notes.
Right.
So.
Well, if you notice on the Who Sell Out, one of the commercials, they go, track records.
Right. It's very,
so
it's very similar.
Unbeknownst to me, they did the Anderson Council and Kurt Ryle, Jem Records, and they put that on the end of the album. Now, if you have a vinyl, that's a locked groove, and it will say Jem Records.
They'll keep saying it over and over again, like the Sgt. Pepper album,
right?
In a groove on Sgt.
On the CD, of course, it's no groove.
Right.
It's actually longer. On the CD, it's the full 15 seconds.
Right.
On vinyl, we were only allowed 1 3/4 seconds for the locked groove.
So it keeps repeating over and over.
Right, exactly.
That's fantastic. That's a great little factoid that I had no idea, and I think the viewers will enjoy that. It's just a fantastic lineup of songs. You just got such a great little stable of artists here on the Jem label. And I have one question though. Believe it or not, one of my viewers did ask a question, sent in a question when I happened in passing to mention him. I was interviewing you, and his question is to you. Is Marty, is there anything you can share about future releases with the Jem Celebrate series? He wants to know, do you ever see a Tom Petty celebration in the future?
Well, I never say what the next one is.
Right. I know that for sure.
I never do. For example, all the recordings for Jem Records Celebrate Pete Townshend were done before like the 10th of January. But because I wanted to do vinyl on this one, it took, months and months and months to get the vinyl.
It's so hard to get now. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. So basically the recording will be taking place between September and December for the next one.
Right.
Come out probably in July or August of 2023.
Right. So we'll say, and that was from Sam St. John, by the way. And Sam, so the answer is, Sam, you never know. Never say never. You could see Tom Petty. You may or may not someday. There's many more. We'll see how as the years go by if Tom Petty shows up.
The idea is that to focus on an iconic writer, not on a group, per se.
Right.
So, for example, it was never on the Beatles. It was John Lennon.
John Lennon as a songwriter.
Beach Boys, Brian Wilson, and same thing with Pete Townshend.
Good point. So, Marty, anything else before we close tonight? Is there anything else you'd like to share about the Jem 50th anniversary celebration?
No, basically, I'll give you a little idea of what's coming in the future.
Sure.
Okay. So August 5th, of course, is Jem Records celebrates Pete Townshend. October will be the debut record by the Airport 77. Which is in the final stages of mixing. I received the artwork this morning. So that'll be out the first week of October.
Oh, great.
There will be a new album by the Anderson Council, which will coming out probably January or February of 2023. And probably in March of 2023 is a record that I'm ridiculously excited about, the second album from the Midnight Callers.
Yes, I'm a big fan of theirs. I'm really looking forward to that one.
And I've heard, they're in the studio weekly, doing it, and I've heard it. I think it's one of the best things that has come out on the label since it's starting up again. It's just a brilliant record. The band has gone leaps and bounds since their debut album, which caused such a stir October 2020.
Yeah, a lot of my viewers love their first album, and a lot of my viewers are also looking forward to album number 2. So
Right.
yeah, you got a lot of great stuff coming up then.
But and then in the spring of 2023 will be the new album from the Weaklings.
Oh wow, we got 4 great albums to look forward to coming up in the next
And
few
that'll
months.
be probably in the spring, but the Weaklings should have a single out, hopefully in the first week of November.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you. I don't want to take, I thank you so much for even giving me this little bit of time tonight. It means a lot to me. I know you have a very busy schedule, so thank you. I very much appreciate it. And people, please get out there. August 5th, by the time you see this video, it's available everywhere. Pete Townshend, Jem Records celebrates. Pete Townshend, pick it up, grab it. I can attest, I've heard it. It's fantastic. I love it. Great artist on this album. And Marty, thanks so much again. www.jemrecordings.com. Go there to check out Marty's website. And thank you, Marty. Thank you for being part of my
pleasure. I enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing you in person soon.
Thank you. I hope so.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.